Welcome to the Act Up podcast, where we interview industry professionals who act down. I have my lovely co-host with me,
Tiffany ROSHAE.
All right. And we're actually not interviewing industry professionals who act down today. But we are talking about something that is, and we have Miss Doja who decided to visit us. Hi, Do. Oh, thank you. Oh, okay. Thanks, Do. But we do have a very interesting, I don't say interesting, I guess it's a topic that people are talking more about, but we definitely have a very personal, interesting connection and stories to this topic, which is grief.
Yes.
You ready to talk about this?
I'm ready. I think because this is something we both shared, the environment and the energy around it feels safe and nurturing. Yeah, so I'm ready.
You know, it's so interesting. So as we were preparing for this, we're both like, I don't know if we're gonna cry and whatnot. But I think like that's grief. Like it's kind of like right now I'm like, we were just singing and dancing. It's like, but we're about to talk about something, serious.
Yeah.
And I think those are like the ebbs and flows and the waves of grief. So we'll discuss it. Yeah. And the purpose of us talking about this is I think a lot of people, artists, non-artists, of course, are going to be affected by different stages of grief in their life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, death necessarily. But there's a lot of grieving, changing, moving. There's a lot of different versions of grief that that you deal with. I think with us, so for those of you who don't know, both Tiffany and I lost our fathers. My father passed away in 2021, and your father passed away
22,
almost exactly a year later, in 2022. And we were working together at the time, so I feel like you all kind of got a chance to see me navigate my father's passing. And, I kind of got a chance to see you navigate your father's passing. And I think to not only talk about grief, but to talk about girls who have lost their fathers in particular is something that I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Who were both daddy girls, right? Like,
you know what? I would say that's what I'm like. It's gonna be great. I'm definitely more of a mama's girl than a daddy's girl, but I think that was my grief. Like I felt. Here we go. We're about to jump into it. I think a part of my grief was not just the loss of my father, but the loss of what we would not be, was the loss of, I won't get a chance to have that. There's a lot of things that I feel like that went unsaid. And a part of that grief was like, I'm grieving the relationship we will never, that we won't have in this physical earth. And that was a part of it too, So...
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so just to give context, I'm trying to put myself back in the space, because it was 2021, and my father had health issues, for quite some time, and it was like on and off health issues. And my father died of heart failure, and so we had kind of always said, Perry Drummer has 9 lives because, because he had gone through serious things in the past, and he'd always made it out just fine. And this felt like another one of those instances, but it was different. And I think I remember because it was 2021, I was home a lot more because of the pandemic and all the things. And I had just bought this house, but I was home for 2 weeks with my parents because I had sold my other house, so didn't have a place to stay. So I basically didn't have any place to live, so I was living with my parents for about 2 or 3 weeks before I could move into this home. And This was May of 2021. And the wild thing is that my father, I kept saying, like, you need to go to the doctor. Like, it doesn't feel like, you're okay, And I mean, like, he was still laughing and vibrant. It just felt like his energy was a little low. And so the very first day that my mom started our drive to help me move in, he went to the hospital. We told him, like, go to the doctor. The doctor was like, you should go to the hospital. And so, like, as soon as we get to Atlanta, it was like, oh, okay, he's in the hospital. The doctor was like, yeah, he needs to be in the hospital right now. And so one of the weirdest things for me was the fact that my father went from, like, lively to, like, not lively. It literally felt like overnight. It felt like I just saw you when I was home, and then the next day it was like, oh, he's in the hospital and he needs to have surgery immediately. And it literally felt like it happened instantaneously. And so for me, he had surgery. He made it out of surgery just fine. But the doctors told us, he's really not in a good position. And I believe at that time they had told us we give him about 6 months to a year to live. And so then we began the process of, okay, rehabilitation and, someone who was functioning stopped being able to walk and, cognitively wasn't as alert as he used to be. And I'm like, he was just fine last week, And so what happened with me personally is I just moved in, didn't have furniture, but had gotten this very serious news that my father was in really serious condition. So I immediately went back to New Jersey. And went back to New Jersey, was with him when he got out of surgery, and they told him that they were going to keep him and give him tests. And I had work that I had to do here in Atlanta. And I was directing a play, which we'll get into that in a little bit. So I was flying from Atlanta to New Jersey. I don't know if you guys remember this.
I remember this vividly.
I was flying to Atlanta to New Jersey every single weekend. And it would be like, we changed the whole schedule, we changed. So I would, like, rehearse the play, I want to say, like, Monday through Wednesday or Sunday through Wednesday or something. And from Thursday to Sunday, every single weekend, I'm flying back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we did that for probably like 2 or 3 months. And it got to the point where my father was able to leave the hospital. But he still had to have a lot of supervision and care and whatnot. And of course I wanted to help my mother out. And I'm trying to think of where I was during that whole process of not knowing what my father's fate was.
You presented strong, because I didn't even realize the timing was a timing until, like, right toward the end.
Right.
Because of how strong you presented.
You know the weirdest thing is, like, my father is a jokester. Like he is, like, even within the hospital, like, he would joke all the time. I actually have a video of him in the hospital bed still making jokes and things like that. And I remember him saying, like, this is morbid, but it was him too. Like, because we all found out together when they kind of gave him this, like, 6 months to a year prognosis. And he was like, well, I guess I gotta keep my clothes together. I'm like, why? He was like, they said I was gonna die, right? Like he was joking about it, like, right, But I feel like there was a divine lightness, I feel, that all of us had in a weird way. For me, it wasn't a humdrum. There was still, I feel like, positive things. Like, I remember, and I have it on my Instagram, like, spending Father's Day in the hospital with my dad. And him being light and jovial and us watching the fatherhood Kevin Hart movie together. And so I feel like as heavy as it definitely was, because I think with anyone that you love, it's difficult to watch them in pain. Okay, they're the tears. It's difficult to watch them in pain. It's difficult to watch them, like physically change in front of you. Thank you. But I do feel like I felt like I could feel God in the midst of that period. And so the day he passed away, I was in Atlanta. And like, the weird thing is that I was in Atlanta driving to Macon because I was looking to look at what property would look like there. And I was in a car with a friend of mine, and I had these little reminders that call Dad, and he was like, oh, you have these reminders to call your dad. And I was like, yeah, I always just kind of give, and we were talking regularly anyway. But I had already just kind of set up just a weekly call home reminder. And I was with him when my mother called me to tell me that he had passed away. And this was in August where he passed away. So he went to the hospital in May. He passed away in August. And for me, I had never had that big of a loss. Of course, I had gone through losses in my family, but never that close. And the wild thing for me is the day I found out was incredibly numb. I don't think I cried. I think it was just kind of quiet. And it wasn't until the next day that I was like, oh, there it is. Something about getting on a plane and traveling and going home that's when it started to settle in for me. And I had certain boundaries that I just didn't want. I never saw my father. I did not want to see him dead. I did not want to see his body. I wanted to remember him alive and jovial and all those things. I didn't want to see that. So that's a little bit of my story. What about you, Tiffany? If you want to share.
I do. And listening to you talk, I almost kind of remember yours more vividly than mine. It's weird.
Yeah.
And I remember we were casting at the moment, and I remember the background of your home. You will always do our morning meetings at your table.
Yeah, my mom's dining room
table. At your mom's dining room. These are the things I remember. And when it was my turn, almost a year later, I didn't know what was happening until I physically got there. So we're from Louisiana, so he was in Lafayette. And a few months before, in June, July, I ruptured my Achilles. And he came and took care of me. And he always kind of... So I'm a daddy's girl, but like you, the only difference is we kind of had to work on that. I was born a daddy's girl, and then life between my mother and my father happened that caused a distance within us.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, we healed that. But so he would always brag. I have a brother, brag about me and my brother, and he was a nurturing parent, as in he always wanted to be physically present if something was wrong. So when I ruptured my Achilles in 2021, he came and took care of me, and I thought I was like, not that it was weird, but I was just like, coming all the way here just to take care of me after the surgery. I was like, that's a lot. So in hindsight, I felt like he kind of knew.
Wow.
Because then February happened, and I did the Clockmaker for Mark. I do the stage management. And so Christmas Day, we were in Cali doing that play, and I had a cat at the time, and he came and spent Christmas alone at my apartment to cat sit.
Wow.
And that was the last time we had together as him being healthy, because in January or February 12th, he called me. He said, "Hey, I think you need to come home." And I was like, "Why? What's going on? Why do I need to come home?" He was like, "Oh, I just had, I had an appointment and they said they may have found something. I think you need to come home." And I've never, ever heard him be like, "You need to come home."
Mm-hmm.
And so I literally the next day packed up my car and I went to Louisiana and I stayed there until he passed.
Wow.
Because when I got there and I went to the appointment with him, she declared the prognosis was stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And they gave him 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
And it was 2.5 months.
Wow.
So they gave us the prognosis in March. He was gone June 28th. And I did come back and forth a little bit, because so I was his caretaker, even though he had a wife. He wanted me to be his caretaker. He was in the military, and they give benefits for stuff like this. So he was like, if you're gonna be here, you might as well get paid for it or whatever. But that never it happened so fast. We didn't even get to do all that. It was like one of my best memories was he took me to the base, showed me where he met my mother, showed me the planes he helped build. He was like a tour guide, giving me a tour of what life was like before I could remember. And just like you said with your father, making jokes. We went to go see his childhood friends. He was doing all these things because he knew there was a clock. But when it was literally, I guess, within the last week or so, it just could change so quickly. So his birthday is June 20th. He passed June 28th. Father's Day is always the 19th or 20th. So he was trying to hold on to one more birthday so he could make 66.
Wow.
And he did it.
Wow.
And it taught me so much about myself, because I actually got overwhelmed by this process. And I decided I need a break. I just need to go back to Atlanta for a few days. It's a 10-hour drive. I went to Atlanta a couple days. So Father's Day happened. We all spent Father's Day together. I drove back to Atlanta the day after Father's Day. He gave me $100, as he always does, give me money. I got to my apartment that night. I got a call that night saying he has some hours.
Wow.
So he held on.
Wow.
To as soon as I left. So I had to pack my car and drive 10 hours the next day back to Lafayette. When I came back. And also the situation isn't as clean because he was married. And that is not, it's just, yeah. So the situation was actually pretty traumatic, more so than the death, than the actual discord.
Yeah.
Wow, that's going on. It was something straight off like a movie.
Yeah.
So long story short, by the time I came back, we were in hospice now, and he couldn't speak. And it was so interesting. Like, he couldn't speak. He was still alive, but he couldn't speak, and he could sit up and he can like look at you and all these things. And his way of communicating was moaning. So my dad was a preacher, and he had a pastor that he served until the pastor died. Dr. E. Edward Jones of Galilee Baptist Church. If some of you watching this, I love y'all. But we turned a sermon on from YouTube from his pastor, and that was the first time he looked up.
Wow.
And he started like making noises. So he could recognize. He had emotions even until then.
Yeah.
And one of the most beautiful memories is I finally got some alone time with just me and him. And my daddy was a proud man. He's a military man. He's a Southern man. He's a preacher. He's a very proud man. And the day before he passed, it was just me and him in a room. Joshua was out the room. That's my brother. The wife was out the room. And there was a moment where the nurses had to change him, and he gave a fuss because he didn't want us to see that.
Yeah.
But it was just, they had to.
Yeah.
And I got to be with him alone, and I said, hey, you can go now.
Oof.
I got Joshua.
Mm.
I got Joshua. I got us.
I'll get the tissue.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
I know, like, it's something out of a movie. I see the things like this in film, and I'm just, not that I feel like it's an exaggeration, but I just never experienced nothing like that. And then I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
You don't want the person you love probably the most in the world to suffer just so you can have them.
Yeah.
So I sat him up. I put him in front of me, and I hugged him like this, and I said, hey, you can go now. I got Joshua. You did an amazing job. You're an amazing father. You raised 2 amazing children.
Yeah.
He has a family. He has a job. We had this conversation. This is the conversation I had with him, and this is maybe why I'm so hard. But I said, you did this. You don't have to prove what good of a father you are. Everyone knows who you are. I'm Tiffany ROSHAE Williams. He's Earl Joshua Williams. Your legacy is here. I got you. You can go now. And the whole time I'm doing this, he's just swaying back and forth, moaning. He was quiet before this.
Girl.
So he was swaying back and forth, moaning. That was my last moment with my father. I stayed in his room for maybe 3 or 4 days in hospice. That night, I finally went back to our Airbnb, our house. He passed after I went out the door.
Wow.
And my brother was in the room for it. He said there was just this loud,
wow.
And that was the last breath. And when I got there, the house wasn't far. When Joshua called me and said, Tiffany, he's gone. He just cried. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. I didn't, like you.
Yeah.
I didn't cry. I got in my car and I got there. And when I got there, I saw him and he had a tear on his face.
Wow.
So he was holding on for us, and it broke his heart to leave here.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most disturbing thing to me is knowing that we love this life, and sometimes in the day-to-day, in the living, we get so ungrateful and forget what's really happening.
Yeah.
And when we got to go, even against our will.
Oh, girls. You know what's so interesting to me is, like, one of the things, I feel like I haven't, like, tapped into this, but it's like, you know, so when someone close passes, I think the question that I ask myself is, like, did they know I love them? You know, like, did they know how much I love them? And I think I think that's why grief teaches us about love and life, you know, because it's like, I want people to know that I love you now. Mm-hmm. I don't want to ask that question when they pass, you know. And I think about my father, and I think I love the fact that you had so many kind of vulnerable conversations or moments with your father. Like, I feel like for me, I know he knew I loved him, and I know he loved me. Mm-hmm. But I feel like I wasn't brave enough to have some vulnerable conversations with him. And there's the stories like my father died of heart failure. But I feel like he also died of a broken heart too. And not broken heart in terms of, like, I think life broke his heart in a way that he could never say and articulate, especially as, like, a black man. You know, like, I asked my mother, and I talk about this all the time, like, you know, like, he never wanted to go to the doctor, like, he never wanted to address any, you know, and I think that's just often common, but I think we don't talk about, like, the emotional tolls that particularly men of our father's generation went through, and how that manifests in their physical bodies and physical beings as well, you know. But are there things that you find difficult. Like, what I mean by this is, like, I'm sorry, this eyelash coming off, it's fine. Like, for me, grief surprised me in weird ways. But I think the way I kind of expected it and also didn't expect it to surprise me is weddings. Like, I had to go to a wedding, I think, 2 or 3 weeks after my father passed away. And that felt just as hard as a funeral.
Wow.
It's something about watching my friend's father walk her down the aisle. And whenever I go to a wedding, it is this. It's something, I love weddings, and I will still always continue to go. But I feel like that's difficult for me now. Like, it makes me feel that his loss, I feel it super strong when I go to a wedding.
Resentment.
Yeah.
I went to one wedding since. You just made me realize, and her wedding was around is in June. June is such a horrible month because of this, and I watched her dad walk her down the aisle, and I was like, oh, I'm really never gonna have that.
Yeah.
And my dad was such a huge part of my brother's wedding. And a lot of our good memories are from that wedding in 2019. And the resentment I feel now I'm like, I look on TikTok at courthouse weddings all the time. Like, I don't want the big thing because I don't want to do the whole picture in the corner of and for those we've lost. I know that's a thing now, but you're so right. I do feel I feel resentment towards weddings, love. Like, there's just. I'm curious about you in relationships after that. As in friendships. I was about to ask you that. Because there are so many friendships in my life that have not recovered and probably won't.
Really?
I turned into a shell of myself.
Really?
What? And you know what's so funny? The first person I laid eyes on after the funeral from my life, I drove here if not overnight, the next day, and I stayed in my room until you had a workshop maybe 7 days later after his funeral, and you're the first person I
wow.
And I actually met Thad in that workshop.
Wow.
I met Thad in that workshop.
Oh my gosh.
And I clung to new people, and I kind of departed from anyone. Like, and I love you, and I know she's watching. Maybe she's watching. I don't know, but my cousin, I literally talked up until the day he passed, and I probably haven't been able to talk to her since. Wow. It's just like when whoever was a part of my life, when he was a part of my life, when he died, that part of me had to die. Oof. I don't know what will happen. I don't know the future. I would love to get a lot of the people back from before I lost him, but I just feel like when he died, a part of me did. Wow. And yeah, I'm curious. How was your relationships after?
That's good. I honestly feel like I'm trying to ask myself how are my relationships after. I feel like for me, the people that held me close are still holding me close. Mm-hmm. I do feel like that. I feel like I don't have a ton of friends, but I do, like, I have a lot of people in my life. Mm-hmm. I do. But I feel like the people who I needed showed up for me. Mm-hmm. I really do feel like that. I feel like it's so weird to say this. It's like, I feel like, and I don't know why it was heavy in the fact that death is heavy. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the people who came and I feel like my mother and I'm an only child, so it felt like they showed up. I feel like they showed up for me, for mm-hmm. sure. I feel like they checked on me, and I feel like I didn't necessarily want to distance myself from them, but this is just me. Mm-hmm. But I feel like they were still there. Like, I remember my friends, like Destiny and Anthony, mm-hmm. I remember them taking me out to lunch, and I, just kept my glasses on mm-hmm. the whole time, and they just sat with me, mm-hmm. Like, I think about my aunts, my mother's sisters, who are phenomenal, you know, who just were there and helped us. You know, my father's family, you know, my cousin, who never was afraid to fly, had flown in, like, you know, like, there are so many things that I do feel like, for me, I feel like in terms of relationships, people did show up, and I feel like that I'm lucky and blessed to have that. One of the things that I did feel like was wild to me is like that masculine love. I felt it go in a weird way, and I was like, oh, there's not. My dad was that masculine love in my life, and I felt its absence strong, for sure. I felt its absence real strong. And that was something that took me off guard, too. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, people also, and kudos to you for reciprocating the love that was given to you. Because people showed, like, even my girl came to the funeral, like, she surprised me, and I broke down at the car outside. People showed up for me in such a way, and it was just all a big mirror to how I deal with my feelings and emotions.
Can I say something really quickly? Like, I almost felt like I was too okay at times. Like I literally started, this therapist I see now, part of me is like, I feel like I'm handling grief too well. Like, you know, like, I felt like I felt like, I'm like, am I in this, or am I avoiding it? You know, but I felt like I was too okay at times. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I love that, because I felt the opposite.
Wow.
I let it just... I quit my job. Like, I was just like, because my father was the one person I am not an easy person.
Yeah.
But I also feel like I'm a copy and paste of him.
Wow.
So he understood me.
Yeah.
He understood that I want things to be in order, because he is such an in order person.
He's military.
Yes. Yeah. He understood that I have this presence, because he had this presence. And so when that left, I'm out here being the person, the copy and paste of the person, the only person in the world who I felt understood it and embraced it. And so, yes, y'all all showed up for me in support and love, but the way I was handled, I was like, I can't feel this, because it's not the person I'm used to feeling for or encouraging. The person I am is not accepted no matter where I am. That's what I felt. Yeah. Grief is a lie, by the way, too. Like, that was the closest to out of here I felt like I was going to get. And it took me but then I may be jumping ahead, but then all of a sudden, 2 years later, one day I woke up and was like, hey, everybody, like, I'm back. 2 years. Yeah. I just wanted to start hanging out and all this stuff. But you briefly touched on being, this was the closest loss. I do also want to say, being front row of a funeral is a different experience. Absolutely. I've only experienced it once. Yeah. I mean, if we live and if we love, we have to do the other part of it, which is lose. But I don't think I'm not in a rush to experience that. And that's when I felt like I was too okay. Like, I disassociated so much in that funeral. It's crazy. Yeah. I cried when I touched him. But other than that, it was like a whirlwind.
And, you know, my dad didn't want a funeral. So he had always said for years, he'd been like, when I go, put me in a Sealy Posturepedic mattress and just put me in the back. Like, that was again, joking. Yes. Like, this is, you know, that was always his thing. Yes. And so, so my mother and I, we did have a service for him, but he would always say, I don't want a funeral. And we wanted to honor his wishes. So we did have a service, but we tried to make it like the least funeral-like that we could. And so we had a burial and had some friends and family there. And then I think we all went to like a restaurant that he would have loved, and you know, his friends and work friends said things, and it was very very much like how my father would have wanted it, which I think may be part of the reason why I felt like, am I too okay with this?
I was just about to, like, can we go back to that?
Yeah. I don't know. I know this big, massive thing happened in my life, and a part of me didn't feel like this big, massive thing happened in my life. It felt like, oh, okay, your father passed away. All right, let's have a funeral. Okay. Life, let's get back to life. You know, like, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like, okay, let's get back to casting, and let's get back to all the things. And when grief comes, it'll come. But, like, let's just keep doing life, you know?
Do you feel guilt? I feel
That's
guilt
good.
about how bad I handled it. Do you feel guilt about how well you handled it?
Oh, that's a good. A part of me does. I would say a part of me did. I was gonna ask you, do you talk to your dad? And I feel like me talking to my father has helped me not feel the guilt as much anymore, you know? Like, I will still talk to Perry, you know? Like, even with the pregnancy, like, my friend Valika, she was like, you know, have you talked to Perry? I'm like, of course, you know? But I feel like I chose to let our relationship continue instead of his death being the ending of it. And so I feel like we still have a relationship. I envision him in heaven with, you know, his family and friends, and people have gone before him, you know. So I feel like I've made a choice that he will continue to stay in my life even though he's not physically here, which helps me not feel guilt even though I still feel grief.
So interesting that that's the whole joke, that we are like the same, but the dark and light version of each other. Because I can't even say his name to this day.
Really?
I have one picture of him in my living room that I'll let be. I don't look at him. I don't acknowledge him. I don't talk to him. Because I tried to in the beginning, but I came to the conclusion like, oh, you dying almost killed me.
Ooh.
And I don't trust that I can handle having a relationship with you and not leave.
Oof.
I can't keep dying.
Oof.
Like, you have to die, or I will. The most thing I do is I keep his name on my favorites, so when I turn my car on or whatever, it'll show. But yeah, I have hours where we just sat, because I was like, I'm gonna make a movie. I told him that. I was like, I'm gonna make a movie about you.
Wow.
And he was like, okay. And we would just put the phone down, and I would just record him for hours.
Wow.
And I can't even tell you what's on there. But one day.
So when we were cleaning out my father's things, the only thing I really wanted was his Bible. This may tear me up. But it's amazing, like, when I think of men being providers, and like my father is still providing for me, like, after his physical life here. So I'll never forget this. So I was in my mother's dining room table, and at first we couldn't find his Bible. We were trying to figure it, because he would always have his Bible with him. And she found it, she gave it to me, and then I was just perusing through it, and he wrote me a note.
Wow.
I do not know when he wrote this note. I don't know if it was recent. It could have been 20 years ago.
Wow.
But he wrote me a letter in the back of his Bible that I only found probably a week or two after he had passed away. And still to this day, like, my mom she made a box for me, and I will still go back to that note that he wrote for me. Whenever he wrote it. And just to find it after he passed was wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is it about that's the one thing in my living room is my dad's Bible.
Really?
Yeah, from the year I was born.
Wow. I don't know what it is. It's just about, you know, about having that, you know, I don't know what that is. I don't know if it was because, you know, both of our fathers were, you know, men of faith. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was because, you know, I saw him. It's the one thing I saw him with all the time. And, you know, I don't know. But
this conversation makes me nauseous.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to throw up.
Oh, no.
But I think it's because it's not a bad thing, honestly. It's like
I'm happy we're talking about it because I'm like...
Yeah, this is the most...
I know, I have it. I'm like, here we are. Like, hi, everybody. But I have never talked really in depth with someone who's also gone through the loss of a father. Mm-hmm. I've talked about it, like, with my mom, but I haven't talked about it with someone else who's gone through the loss of a father.
Well, I don't, this is so out of order, but so much is coming to me now. What was healing about it is him and my mom had a conversation. It has taught me a lot about what's important.
Yes.
Him and my mom had a conversation before he left where they forgave each other. Because she never remarried.
Wow.
She never remarried. Me and my brother are her world. She's a woman of faith. She never remarried. She wanted to come and take care of him till to leave the earth. And they had a conversation and he apologized to her and he's like, in retrospect, this is none of what, you know, what was that important and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I got to see, like, we could be mad at someone now, but when it's time to go for real,
come on.
That resent and that regret is real. Yeah. So I try to keep that. It taught me, like, to get out of my own way and emotions when it comes to people I love.
Absolutely.
Because, like I said, I saw my dad die with a tear on his face. So wow. I don't, I try to hold, I used to throw things away a lot easier. Yeah. A lot easier before he passed. And I touched him. I held him. When I say it was hard as this rock, it took like 30 minutes to an hour for him to turn. Like when I first got there, he was warm. Wow. By the time they rolled him out, he was hard as that table. Wow. And it was like, oh, this is all fake. That's why I quit my job. Like, it turned me crazy. Wow. I probably should have took your route and not seen him like that. But in my mind, I'm like, all this is fake. Like, none of this is real. What are we even doing? Wow. Because I know what happens at the end. You turn into a hard table. You have no breath. You're not a human being. You're gray. What does this even mean? It was an existential crisis.
For me, I know that this is different. Like, for me, it's like, I still, strangely, like, don't believe he's gone. In a weird way. Like, I know he is, but I'm just like, I don't know. There's just something in me that, like, I've accepted it, but there's, like I would say to my mom, like, can you believe he died? I'm literally, like, it's like, there's something to me that also feels, like, unbelievable about it.
Can I ask a question? And you don't have to answer, but there's been numerous things. You I think, 3 years older than me? There's been numerous things where it happens for you first.
Yeah, I know.
So now I want to prepare. I'm curious.
What?
How do you feel about pregnancy? Being a mom without him?
That's where grief hits the hardest for me.
Okay.
Grief hits the hardest that, you know, I'm in a beautiful relationship and my partner reminds me so much of my dad in a wild way. And like I would date guys, like my father was a dark-skinned man. Like if I dated a light-skinned guy, he'd be like, oh, so you don't want to marry somebody who look like your daddy? Like he would say something like that. And like I am with someone who acts and looks like my father. And like in a very strange way. Like other family members have seen him and they've been like, this is a little, you know. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when I do grieve, I grieve that my dad will never meet Teddy. Like I'll grieve that like Teddy can never cook for my, like, I think about, like, oh, Teddy would cook meals because they're both from Louisiana. And my dad would have loved to, like, eat his food. And he would have been finally so happy that he wouldn't have to be stuck with whatever vegetables my mother and I were making. I could see my Teddy just being in where my father, he was like watch TV all day and watch Westerns. And I can see them having so much fun together because they are totally kindred spirits, and they would talk. They would have had conversations without me. They would have been on the phone without, like, they would have been great friends. And like, I grieve that. I grieve that he will never see that I'm in a beautiful relationship with someone who's so much like him. I grieve that I feel like I haven't, like, truly let myself even really, like, lean into the fact that he'll never meet my child, you know? Like, I never had a grandfather. So both my parents' fathers were not in their lives.
Wow.
And so I always wanted a grandpa. And the fact that, like, my daughter will not, I think I told people it's a girl, but I think the fact my daughter won't know my father that's what breaks my heart. You know? So.
But then she's going to come out and maybe, high chance now, look like him.
Right, exactly. I don't know, you know?
So this may be a gift.
You know, yeah. So I feel like when it comes to grief, that's a part of the grief, is like, I feel like I'm grieving that he'll never hold my daughter, but I know that he would have been ecstatic to be grandpa, you know? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I even just listening to your process, and I'm like, grief can be so consuming. You feel like I'll speak for myself. Grief can be so consuming. It feel like what I see, that's grief.
Yeah.
You know what I feel? This is grief, because it's a new person in my life.
Yeah.
And so it introduced itself in a specific way. So the way I deal with it and have a relationship with it, that's who it is.
Yeah.
But hearing, and it's so taboo to talk about because, you know, people, it hurts. So
it's
rarely
so
do I get to hear
yeah.
other people's in-depth experience. So I'm like, who is this you're talking about? No, I know grief as this person.
Right, I know.
Oh, grief, you're actually that. You know what I'm saying? Like the way you describe it, it's like, it is so different for everyone.
Absolutely. And like for me, like I'll have plenty of times where like I feel like I'm fine. And then it'll be like some small thing or some little thing. Like me, you know, I went to visit Teddy's hometown, and just being in Louisiana brought up a lot of things for me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it's still in there. Like when you think you're done with it, it's like, oh no, I'm still here, you know? So that has definitely been a big...
That was the big roller coaster, never not knowing when it was going to show up. Used to usually see it as a person just reach out and touch me.
Wow.
Like that first year, the first 3 months, I mean, it took me 6 months not to just wake up and cry. And I think that's what almost took me out. It was just like, I thought that was going to last forever. I thought the waking up, I would open my eyes and tears, I wouldn't even be like crying, but I would open my eyes and just tears would fall.
Tears were there.
The sadness, that don't even feel like the right word, was just that ingrained in my DNA.
Yeah.
But then then I stopped, and then I'm like, oh, that's when I start feeling guilty. I'm like, oh, did I not love him as much?
Yeah.
I almost was comforted by my grief.
Yeah,
like, because it felt like, at least that's my connection with him now. Being sad about him not being here. So when that left, then it was those emotions. So it's just, I also was telling someone the other day, I was like, eventually, if God blesses me, I'm going to have more years without him than with him. Because I was 33 when he passed.
Yeah.
So that's weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's weird.
Yeah, I was 35 when my father passed. And it was the wildest year of my life. It was the biggest highs and the biggest lows of my life all happened within that year. I felt like I was on a crazy roller coaster. So
I'll never forget you saying 33 is going to be a year.
Sorry.
And then, that's yeah.
I don't know. 33 was a big year for me too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, so there's for me, and I know a lot of people.
It is for a
Like
lot of
that,
people.
that Jesus
yeah,
year
that Jesus year
is like, okay, here we go. So yeah. All right. Well, that was part 1 of our conversation.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about creativity and grief.
So birth after loss, basically.
Oh, that's a great way.
Death, the rebirth.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned.